Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, and you are?
Ivan Ozerets.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. And from Dallas, we have Dave Anderson, and now we're going all the way to South Africa. I'll go first. See who pronounces his name better. Do I get it, or does he get it? Petrus Koekemoer. Give it a shot, Coach.
You're getting better, but it's Petrus Koekemoer.
Petrus Koekemoer. I remember being with you one time, and you told the gentleman your name, and he said, "Great to meet you, Peter." Actually, the first time I met you in person was at Dave Anderson's place in Brookhaven.
Mm-hmm.
You brought over
absolutely correct.
You and your wife, and shout out to the late Coach Charles. You brought over his wife, brought over 25 people. Yeah, let's begin. Let's talk tennis. Give us the update, Coach Petrus. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, no, first of all, it's such a privilege. It's like I'm with royalty. And it's been a couple of years since I've seen you guys. And Dave, thanks for being on the call as well. And just appreciate you guys spending time with me today. I feel a little bit overwhelmed, to be honest. No, really looking forward to this.
Tell the listeners what you're currently doing.
Okay, so currently I'm called George in the Western Cape. Beautiful part of the country. Amazing. It's quite different from where I used to be up north, close to the Kruger National Park. But came over here, came back from the US, needed to find a place to work. So I reached out to a couple of people, and I met Lizelle Foree. She's from Great Tennis. I joined their academy here in George, and then I was there for about 2+ years, and I just felt the need to, open a development center. Now, currently, I've opened the development center focused on fortunate kids that won't be otherwise have access to coaching, and so that's what I'm doing now. We've got about 7-8 full-time students that we identified within this community. Yeah, looking forward to this journey, getting them, changing their lives, not just forwards and back, but really investing in their lives, hopefully, and they can pay it forward again.
And tell us about the facilities.
The facility, it's a public facility, nice big wall. Always think of the Welby wall. And, and if it's somewhere, there's a wall, there's a way. So we've got a great wall. We've got great athletic fields. Actually, right next to us, they just built, I want to say almost close to 40 million rands of Olympic style athletic field, tartan. And, it's public. And right now we don't, have sole rights on the facility, but we're very fortunate that we can use this facility, and the municipality and the city has been really open. We can launch the center there.
And funds? What about fundraising? How do you make it work?
Right now, we've got a couple of, I want to say, pioneers, people that have raised their hands and said, "Hey, we'll be the front runners of this." So I've got about 5 or 6 full-time students in the program, and gives me the opportunity to pull in these community kids. And it's always difficult starting off something. People are waiting for success stories to actually get involved first. So it's been a little bit of a struggle, to be honest. And right now, it's just, one step at a time. We're trying just to get better, get them exposed, get them trained, give them a good tennis education. And from there on in, we hope that funds will, almost find us, because it's really tough finding.
But so you're not affiliated with a school like you have been in the past?
No. This is all driven privately and by myself. And my family, if I can say that.
I guess we could go back to for the listeners. It's been a long time now. How long have you been connected to the GreatBase curriculum?
The GreatBase curriculum. I've got a very interesting story on that. It was in 2014, actually. I'm not sure if you can remember how we connected, but yeah, I was always studying, and my poor kids, when I went to Tennis South Africa, the poor students always went, please don't go to another course because we're going to get a new forehand again. And, what's hip, what's new. And I was always wanting to just get better as a coach because I didn't play junior tennis. And then I stumbled across this weird-looking website way back then. And, wow, the rest is history, to be honest. We always say, tennis has the possibility to change lives. But I'll tell you one thing, the GreatBase has truly saved my life as well. And, I stumbled across the free information on Tennismith. And I remember almost not closing an eye, just watching those videos one by one. We woke up, or my wife woke up the next morning. I told her, we're changing. So, that's from 2014.
It's amazing. That's over 10 years ago. The trip to Brookhaven, that wasn't easy to organize.
No, it wasn't easy, but, like you always say, education, exposure, and experience. And, I wanted our kids way back then to, actually dream a little bit, dare a little bit. And, the late Charles, Charles, a great friend of mine, always talking about, hey, let's make sure we give kids, opportunities. And, coming from South Africa, it's not always easy. And we decided, hey, let's put a touring group together, or tour group. And we were about 28 people. Guys were so open to us, I remember, even way back then, wasn't at its best. And we were very fortunate to spend time at Brookhaven. What an amazing facility, amazing people, and the team there. And that just, kept the ball never looked back since then.
Dave Anderson, I remember, because that was the first time I had met Petrus in person. So I had talked to him on the phone, and you were watching him work. And to his credit, you said, "Oh, so you've worked with him quite a bit before?" I said, "No, I just met him at the airport." For our listeners, that experience should happen more, but if someone really takes a deep dive and they spend a lot of time with the content, we can have a really high level of understanding, high level of competency. Dave, go ahead.
No, I remember that well. Petrus was telling that story. I remember looking at you and thinking, what was the connection? What was the history of it? And it was beyond impressive to see the quality of coaching. And, but beside all of the obvious things that you had acquired there, Petrus, what grabbed my attention the most was your passion. And, your hustle, your passion, and your commitment to your students, and just and to the process. It was really, really impressive. I think those kids that were with you, very fortunate to have you as their compass. And I think it was good for the kids on our end because you had a variety of players there, and some I know really, really had to scrape to make that happen, and they didn't have, some of them didn't have multiple rackets, and it was just a great, I think, cultural blend on both ends to be able to have that happen.
Oh, and thank you for making that happen, Dave. Hosting, a group of 28, that's not so easy to do. I say this often about Roger Federer. In fact, I saw yesterday where he said that he's tired of playing golf and he's going to come back and play some tennis exhibitions. So that's great news for the tennis world. With the Afrikaner, Lynette Federer, to me, the the politeness. Certainly, I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time around your family, but so many South Africans. Tell us a little bit about the Afrikaner. Where does that culture? I would say this is that, Roger Federer, obviously so many things, but that's a plus in his column that his mother's an Afrikaner.
Yeah, what a strong nation, I almost want to say. Times have changed, and unfortunately, it's not always the case anymore. Afrikaner, it's there's still strong individuals out there, but hanging around tennis courts all day long, and a lot of parents do carry their kids' bags, and it's like, whoa, no, that shouldn't happen. But yeah, absolutely, the Afrikaner, rugby, biltong, braaivleis, which is a barbecue. It's no wonder Roger has achieved what he achieved, because with Lynette, being a South African, there's no way of going around discipline, and there's going to be work ethic, and there's going to be commitment.
Yeah, I remember Raven Clausen, you don't speak informally to an adult. The way you greet an adult, I know with they would be at Dave Anderson's place and say, Coach Dave, or I know I had either Coach Steve or Uncle Steve. What is it, Tani? Is that the term?
Yeah.
And what on the men's side?
Tani, on the ladies' side, if someone's 10 years older than you, it would be the norm. And Tani, you won't just call people on their names.
Right.
For the most part.
That's really gone away here, and I think it changed in the Northeast, for example, much faster than it would have changed in Texas. But you don't hear Mr. Jones, Mrs. Jones, Dr. Jones with that level of respect. In Texas, Dave, how does that go now? Do you find the juniors greet the adults?
Yeah, I think that if you went outside of the culture of our academy, you would find that the average kid roaming the streets, it's pretty much non-existent. I don't think it's disrespectful. It's just gone. I think if you go into the more rural areas, you still hear a lot of yes, sir, no, ma'am, that kind of language. But, it seems in the past 15 to 20 years, it's slowly just kind of disintegrated. There are a few parents who still mandate it, and like you said, we still around the club try to teach the kids inside of our environment. Every coach is addressed by coach, and when they actually develop great interaction with all the adult club members and such. So it's a really good training ground for them for later in life.
So Raven approached. Obviously he being South African, Lynette Federer would connect with South Africans on the tour when she was traveling, watching her son play, and he said, Tani, Lynette, and she said, I'm not that old, don't call me, just call me Lynette. Julian Krinsky, so many South Africans, and I had so much to do with training his coaches that it had to be, easily one of the largest tennis camps in the United States. And then he certainly became very broad, where he had golf and cooking and SAT prep and training to be a sports agent and on and on and on, the different departments of his camp. So anyway, I was lecturing to the tennis camp staff, and they took a break and had to make some announcements. And so I just went from the front of the room to the back of the room, and I sat behind these young South Africans. And Arvind Arvidan, who's the leader of the camp, said, you cannot touch a kid. You cannot touch a kid. And referring to corporal punishment. So in South Africa, for the longest time, they stayed with corporal punishment. So you'd be in school and you get paddled, and then you'd go home and you get paddled for getting paddled. So one South African boy turned to the other South African boy. They're all like 19, 20 years old. And he goes, wouldn't you know it, now it's finally our turn. You can't do it anymore. But that existed a long time. That type of discipline in South Africa, correct, Petrus?
For sure, Coach. No, I mean I'm giggling because you got in trouble at school. Oh my word, it was going to be really bad at home.
Yeah, that's definitely flipped. There's that cartoon where the teacher's on the student's case and the parents are on the teacher's side, but now it's just the opposite, where the parents are on the kid's side. With No, I remember fooling around in the gym, and I pushed this kid Danny Ziff off the top of the bleachers, and it was really scary. He had the wind knocked out of him, and he just went boom. Everybody stopped and looked, and he wasn't moving, and I remember the athletic director called me over, and he slapped me across the head, and he was nervous too. And looking back at it, so like any 12-year-old boy, went home and told mommy, Mr. Buckley hit me today. And so my old man, there used to be a cartoon, wait till your father comes home. So my father comes home, and I'm the youngest, so I'm Stevie. So also in here, Stephen, Mark Smith, step into the back room, in this big TV room. And it was classic. He said, I understand that Max Buckley hit you today. I said, yeah. He goes, number one, you deserved it. Number two, we'll never talk about it again. Do you understand? I said, yeah, I understand. Those days I think are gone. With in some countries, I told a group of kids yesterday. I said, okay, PG-13, raise your hand. Have you seen a PG-13 movie? They all raised their hand. I said, okay, I'm going to use the S word. And you actually, I think, in many clubs in America, you get fired for using a little profanity. The Canadians, for example, are really polite, but coaches are allowed to swear more in Canada than they are here in the U.S.
Well, yeah, I was going to just kind of ask about whenever you get to make that cultural jump, and you made the jump to tennis in the United States and then back to South Africa. What were the biggest contrasts, especially like from the culture of the, say, parents and players as you entered into the United States and began coaching? Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. The first thing, actually, adult tennis,
Mm-hmm.
South Africa, I mean, for the biggest part, your clients are juniors. And I remember, getting to the US and, okay, school, it goes on till like 3:30 to 4. And the juniors, it's where's the kids we're going to help out? And no, they only come later. And I remember struggling to get courts in the US because the adults were it was great. And that's one thing I wish we could have more in South Africa. And yeah, I think, that was the big thing is that, kids coming out late at school, that was kind of a little bit of a weird one for me. Finally reached the US. I always thought, because locally in South Africa, kids get out at school, they are on the sports field, directly after that. And they play so many multiple sports that helps out. But that was the big thing for me, that was, wow, it was a big challenge for me going to the US. But cultural, I would say, Dave, a kid's a kid. I do think, a Boris kid and the South African kid is pretty tough, but, when it comes down, who's going to be the most hungry, when it comes down to the cultural differences, I would say that the most of the kids that I've worked with in the US were, fortunate, wealthy kids. And, sometimes I got the feeling that it was more parent driven than really the kid driving it. And locally, yeah, especially where I am now, it's the opposite. It's kid driven, especially the community kids. And, do kids really still want to change their future? do they really still see that the tennis racket could open doors? That's the ticket for them to go see the world. And, for the most part, I would say that's a big difference because living in the US, kids don't know, different parts of the world maybe, where South Africans, they're hungry to see the world. And I think that's one thing that stood out.
No, thanks for that. With a shout out, let's go tell us a little about the story. First name, last name, age, background. I think more Schalk, more of a rugby background early on, but he recently sent a student here, and I told Ivan, I said, this gal, Afrikaner, she's going to know our curriculum so well. And of course, Ivan, you could comment on that. But my point is, touch upon this as well, is that, so you left, fortunately the program was turned over to Schalk. Like say, Miran Mann is moving from Toronto to Vancouver. He's taking over, he's going to direct a facility in Vancouver. And Philip McCarr's the owner. It just went without saying, he just hired, Miran's right-hand man, Patrick. But I think that's fantastic that the program you left before you came to the United States, and now you've returned. But tell us a little bit about Schalk. And he's a young coach. He's not, but 22, 23 years old?
Yeah. Well, Schalk, he's an amazing, amazing person. Schalk was the typical guy. Actually, the Schalk skitter, he's in Alspruit now. I remember landing at this high school, and then, the school, the principal, the head of tennis, actually going like, Schalk's not the kind of guy help out. He's a little bit rough around the edges, and guy played rugby and played all different sports, and I'm sure you won't mind me telling this, but used not the greatest language, and I'm like, yeah, Schalk over here, I want you. And he shocked at me. I said, yeah, I'm not going to yell at you because you're using this. You need help. You need guidance. And he was really competitive. And I took him under my wing. He was this typical guy that was willing to be an appy, be a guy that's going to go for 3 years, not expect a lot and just train. And, he was part of us or our program in Nelspruit. Didn't ask a lot of questions, was just hungry to learn, absolute hungry dog. And, now, and for a public school, I think they're actually one of the better public schools around in the country, competing against, private schools that have got, bigger names and doing incredible. What he did with Shanae, the girl who visited you, telling Shanae, you've got something, but the base, you need to make improvements. And 3 years ago, no way that Shanae would, be competing on a national level. What achieved with her is simply amazing. 3 years later, top 10 in the country, in the nation at the 18s. Not that it's about that. Wow, if you really love what you do, you really immerse yourself. Yeah, I've got the biggest respect for Schalk. I actually just spent time with Schalk in Bloemfontein Nationals. We had 2 national tournaments in Bloemfontein, central parts of the country. And his players are going to do really, really great things going forward in the future.
No, that's great. Dave, your thoughts on that? Typically, Dave and I spent quite a bit of time in a small city, Tyler, Texas. And you certainly, when you leave a place, it's like, okay, we want to have our students that we're leaving behind have success. But a lot of times it doesn't go that way. What are your thoughts on that, Dave? A program be sustainability?
Yeah, it's a great topic, and it's when we were driving up to play a match, a great young coach, Coach Andreas, and I were speaking about this a little bit, and there's a line I'll never forget from Herb Kelleher, who was the Southwest Airlines founder and CEO. and he said, you've done a great job when you're, running a company or something, and that your death becomes a non-factor in the whole process, and it's business as usual, and meaning you really train people well. And I think that there always needs to be a succession plan, and somebody being more than capable of stepping up and doing a very close version of what you do. And I told Andreas yesterday, I said, listen, if I got hit by a truck today, I think you could run this. You have the capability to run it. And I said, and certainly if you got hit by a truck as well, Dion could take it at a level that very few people could run it at. And then there's another young guy that is 2 years in, but like the gentleman you're talking about, he's just very, very hungry. But I think to leave that intact and have a transition plan where it's so smooth, and the message is clear. And I don't think it happens often.
Around the world, that many places where people truly are taking beginners, and next thing you know, they're a national level player. Ivan could say a few words about Coach Peter. I think you're mispronouncing Schalk's first name. How do you say it? His full name?
Skitter.
Yeah, your pronunciation is getting better. It's good. But
I'm getting better, Coach.
Tell us about your thoughts on Schalk's student.
Yes, I was very impressed. You told me she'd know the whole system, all the information, and I didn't doubt you, but just seeing in person, like, wow, I never met this person, this player before, and she just knew everything. She knew, I'd say, 95% of what we had to present to her and help her with, and so it was great. It was just an amazing experience to get to meet somebody from across the world who is learning the system just like we're trying to teach the players that we have here. So it was a privilege to get to meet her and try and help her out with her game.
The theory of isolation. When Coach Anderson and I were in Tyler, Texas, we were told, I first got there in 1981, that the kids from Tyler couldn't compete with the kids from Dallas. And, I just think this, tennis players come from everywhere. And,
yeah,
but I think, let's say a place like South Florida, there's so much shopping and bopping because there's so many different programs to choose from. So sometimes simplest is best. Coach Anderson, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of falls in line with if you want to be great, sometimes you can't have a plan B. But I think in junior tennis in this city, I remember, talking to you, Steve. Oh gosh, it was a decade and a half ago or more, and I said, I'm afraid Dallas is becoming South Florida. And sure enough, it's kind of evolved into a version of that with so many options. And there should be a lot of great tennis programs and a lot of, great clubs in a city of this size, but too many things on the menu to pick from seem to never end well, even at our club with 25 plus pros. And, people fall victim to that. They just have trouble staying the course, following a blueprint.
Let me just do this for a second, guys, with, and I'll certainly forget too many people, but South Africans, Dennis Vandermeer, the late Dennis Vandermeer, he's certainly a pillar. And I first met him in 1976. Certainly, we have dedicated several podcasts to Dennis, and we have one podcast scheduled with Eddie Parker, who worked for Dennis for a long time. And the whole thing is to carry the torch from tennis teachers from the past. One thought that, several of our students over the years have played at Hilton Head. And Dennis's widow, Pat, she just recognizes our students right away. Jim Lair would say, or has said many times, you had to watch Dennis. You had to see him work, because people would criticize Dennis. Dave Anderson, why don't you just make something, give us a comment or two on Dennis?
Well, immediately, you think of a charismatic, highly intelligent person who had group dynamics that were second to none, and could, the majority of what I witnessed was with mass numbers and making it look like it was a private lesson in terms of individuality. Just very, very sharp. I mean, he would have been a great bartender.
Yeah.
During happy hour, yeah.
His parents were missionaries. I one time flew into Hilton Head. I was at Savannah Airport, and his older brother was there. I went right up to him and said, "You're Dennis Vandermeer's brother." And we ended up spending the week together, going out to dinner, and it was just amazing. But yeah, he's always saying that Dennis should have been a missionary. He had a great cause with religion, but he could have had a bigger audience, his brother said, if he chose religion. Petrus, in South Africa, is there any connection? Do people talk about Dennis Vandermeer and his contributions, or like Vandermeer progressions, Vandermeer group dynamics? Do you hear any of that?
No, Coach. There's some people that have been overseas. We're fortunate enough to spend time with them. But in general, unfortunately, it's a no. Sorry on Dennis Vandermeer. I just arrived in Nelspruit, West Coast, and I shared the court with an older gentleman and Dennis personally. But I'm yelling out, "Hey guys, okay, let's the Vandermeer serve progression," and where you serve and twisting up behind your back, and this coach did a backflip and he says, "Dennis Vandermeer, where did you get that?" And I'm like, no, he's a pillar of pace, and instantly, we were connected. But sad to say, but yeah, so it's not the case that group dynamics and things like that are discussed from Dennis's background.
I know Dave could talk about so many South Africans as well. The tennis world is such a small place. But another pillar is Bill Jacobson, the founder of CompuTennis. And we certainly have dedicated some time to him on this podcast. In fact, I spoke to him. He was such a gentleman that, he's older now and didn't think he was up to it physically. But what a brilliant mind. And it's just amazing to me there's not enough historical references. This Alex Ovechkin, Russian hockey player playing in the National Hockey League, breaking Wayne Gretzky's record. It just seems like in hockey, there's such an appreciation for history, but not so much with tennis. I think that's one great thing about the Laver Cup, and Federer putting that together with Tony Gotzik to honor the history of Laver and the players from the past. Dave, what comes to your mind with Bill Jacobson?
Well, way ahead of his time. CompuTennis, which was, I think it was the CT 120, one of the, early on methods to be able to give true statistical analysis on tactics and things like that. I think of a lot of, the two names you just mentioned. I think of Longview, Texas, where at the Courthouse Athletic Club, when I can't remember the order they were in, but fortunate there to host a clinic with Dennis Vandermeer through you and through Tennis Tech, and then we did the same thing with CompuTennis, and I think of the match that Timmy Hurst played Chad Clark, and it was charted, and the history of those two players and where they ended up was really revealed in that one particular match, even though the outcome was showing differently. The stats really were prophetic in how they predicted where both players would go.
Yeah, Steve Aberson came in and did that for Bill, ran that long weekend for us. And Timmy Hurst went on to play at SMU, and Chad Clark played at Texas. And Timmy was the happiest guy in the world, and because he had taken the set. But Chad was the one who was forcing. He was missing volleys, missing overheads. He was just dictating, dominating. And I can remember Timmy's father, brilliant guy, George Hurst. And who's a gentleman who's in your area? He's worked with Austin Krychek. He's worked with Bryan Brothers.
Philip Farmer.
Philip Farmer. So it was in the 14s, and it was similar. Timmy beat Philip Farmer, and I had charted on Bill Jacobson's CT 120, and I tried to explain to him. I said, Timmy, you didn't win the match. Philip lost the match, but he was, because Philip was coming in. He was missing volleys, missing overheads, and I said he was trying to play a man's game, and you're playing a boys' game. And Timmy hit the ball really well, and just to go on and be able to play at SMU, he became a really good player. But certainly that's a South African. Of our 8 pillars, only 4 of them are from the U.S. Here's another name from the past, Russell Seymour. Russell moves to Tyler, Texas. He had been the director of South African tennis, the player development side. Maybe that wasn't the title, but he was the leadership role of the federation, and so he's a very good senior player. I saw him. It goes by so fast. I was at coaching at the 70s, and he was there, and I hadn't seen him in years, and so he met with me, and he said, all your kids hit the ball so well, would be all right if I gave playing lessons to some of them. So I said, 100%. It's kind of like Dave Sievertson, who was on last week, and, these senior players that are so knowledgeable, just to be around them for 30 minutes, let alone taking a playing lesson. So he gave, quite a few playing lessons, and it worked out great. So he ended up having a lot of respect for what we were doing, and to the point where it never got past the exploratory stage, but we were recommended to go to South Africa because he came to the U.S. That might have been a little before I met you, Dave, or you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember it. He lived in a little neighboring city outside Tyler, and I just ran into him a few years ago. Russell and his son Gary at Billy Freer's funeral.
Okay.
Yeah, he was quite a guy.
With and then through that, there was a South African, Daryl Weiss. He was in the Army with Craig Tiley. And that's how Craig Tiley found out about this program we had. Is Daryl Weiss said, you need to go to the United States. You want to study tennis, go to this little 2-year college in Tyler, Texas. But it was through Russell Seymour that just a small group, 2 different groups. One was John Lofney Diaga, and the other Jeff Kotier. Petrus, want to say a little bit about JL? You, I've been in South Africa with you and drove down the street that's named after him. Why don't you tell us a little about JL?
Oh, yeah, in Ermelo. He grew up in Ermelo, where we also used to have a tennis school before we went to Nelspruit. Great player, great story. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to bump into him once or twice. And, he always tells me about the story about you hiding his cereal. It is one story that always stands out. It's like, that guy, he stole my cereal. That I can't believe he hid it from me. So yeah, he's, he knows what we do and is very supportive of what we do. And overall, just a great guy, Davis Cup player, Davis Cup captain for a while, and really successful career on the tour. Also had a tennis academy. I think he a little bit more based in the US, from what I understand currently. I think a gentleman called Denton Mankies is running right now where JL used to be. That's JL, I don't think he's spending that much, with juniors anymore than I think he did in the past. But, interesting guy, great guy.
He's done many different things, but one was he brought Federer and Nadal together for that exhibition in South Africa. It's interesting how tennis connections work out. So Russell organized a couple groups because he was in a leadership role with the South African Tennis Union, and another was Jeff Kotier. And then that's really how Tiley was recognized and became the Davis Cup captain, because JL, I would say that his time, Dave, with us was so short, but he ended up spending a lot of time with Craig Tiley, and who was with us for 7 years. But it's like not knowing Dennis Vandermeer, Bill Jacobson, and then Russell Seymour comes to town. So there was just mutual respect. And then, like say Tiley, who works so hard, highly intelligent, driven guy. That's just the way life works. Is Russell Seymour doesn't move to town. Tiley doesn't end up working with John Lafindiaga. And I mentioned Jeff Kotier because those two went on and played Davis Cup. So they got to the level of national prominence. What comes to your mind with that, Dave? You were part of that when those guys came to town.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that group, and I really, it's funny. Gary Seymour, and this is just an off the topic a little bit, but Russell Seymour's son Gary was coaching in the Dallas area at the time, and years later, we were just talking about a variety of things, and this came up. And Gary said that Jeff was, I don't, what was he, Steve, 13, maybe 14 when he was a young boy when he was here.
Yeah. And 12, 13, yeah.
Yeah, 12, 13. And Gary was tying everything together, and he said he knew he was in trouble. His player was in trouble because Jeff was playing a Texas tournament, and said the guy hit a great lob over Jeff's head, and Jeff went back and hit a tweener winner. And, but that period, I remember, Costas Skopelitis and all these names start popping into my head. Jason Stoltenkamp and in addition to the ones you were talking about, and I think it was an interesting period. And I remember I was in Longview at the time primarily, and it was a very fortunate thing for a young Chad Clark too, because between the playing sets with Diaga and they played pretty evenly at the time. I think Diaga probably got the best of him, but it was good exposure for a young Chad Clark. That's one thing I remember vividly. He had a lot of unique experiences, even though he was kind of in an isolated little part of Texas. But yeah, talented group. I think, it is funny how opportunities appear, and some people grab them and make the most of it. And I think that Tiley's interaction during that period certainly was a catalyst in where he's sitting today. I remember bumping into him at the U.S. Open when he was coaching at Illinois, and he was at the Open with Diaga and Robbie Koenig, and he did a little introduction in that. But he, at that point, he was he was a few more steps down the road. But all of it, if you go back to the point of origin, it's really fascinating.
Petrus, I think South Africa. I told you this before. To raise money, I think for South Africans, I want to go through a little more with history, but tell us the exchange rate. Where are you now with that?
Coach, I'm under correction, but I think it's 19 to 1, 19 South African rands for $1.
So it's so difficult for South Africans to leave South Africa.
Yeah, no, it's tough. If you don't have a money tree back in your yard, you're going to struggle getting out of South Africa, getting to the right tournaments and stuff like that. But on Jeff, I remember, he did great coaching-wise as well, but he helped out Cabal and Farah, world number one. He was a long-time coach for them. But I remember also the story on Jeff, you saying, when he was there, Monday through Thursday, during practice sets, he would lose, play to the guy's strengths. And then, come the weekend, when it really matters, he would beat people like the Bongos to who he lost in the week. So, that always stuck with me.
Yeah, coming back to the age, when he was with us, David, he was a little bit younger than Clayton Stanley and Timmy Hurst, and they were both beating him in practice. But so we go to a tournament, he beat both of them. He was just a gamer. It's amazing. He was in this horrific car accident. His nephew died. He was told at that point he had won ATP doubles titles. He's a small guy too, 5'7", 5'8". And he was told that he would never play again, but he came back and won an ATP title. Recently it wasn't very much money. It was $700, but we helped sponsor the player. We could talk about that. But that $700 coming from the U.S., that goes a long ways to help someone go to a national tournament in South Africa. But the next person on my list, and again, I forget so many, is, and I would think perhaps Julian Krinsky might have been the one who brought Mark Spann over. But Mark Spann, he certainly, he knew Craig Tiley. They grew up roughly the same age, and way back then, Tiley, say if he lost at a tournament, he would stay and work as a volunteer in the tournament. I think that's a great story because now he's referred to as the greatest tournament director in our game. But one thing about Mark Spann is his mother, Ann Shilcott, she was a Wimbledon champion, and so. I think, the understanding of traditional tennis and modern tennis, someone like Ann, I have not too often do you get a letter from, and this has happened to me a few times, but you get someone who's won a Wimbledon title and they're writing you a letter thanking you because they didn't know some of the nuances, some of the details regarding technique. Like going forward and playing conventional approach volleys. I liked how, that was, in her mind, that was traditional tennis, and playing approach shots. But then you would know Dave Anderson with, when Braden first came on the scene to close the racket face, that was radical. What do you mean, Eastern grip, the semi-Western grip, the racket face is already closed. And, people now look at Vic, where his work, it's taboo. It's old school. It doesn't stand the test of time, which is wrong. But I want to at this point bring up an experience that ties in with another Wimbledon champion, same age. One won in 1955, one in 1956. So Ann Shilcott, Mark's mom, and for our listeners, Mark he owns a tennis club in the Philadelphia area, Upper Dublin. He's been a guest on our podcast. So Angela Buckston wins Wimbledon. And so Dave and I were in Florida, and she came over. It was a project sponsored by Range Rover. And she wrote for the Daily Telegraph. And like Ann Shilcott's letter on tennis teaching, Angela Buckston wrote an article that I have a copy of. I don't have it digitized, but can dig it out. And, she said, I've taught tennis for 25 years, and it was, I didn't know this and I didn't know that. But there's a podcast, Daniel Kieran. It is very popular. I understand they're ranked one on for a few years now on some poll. They've been ranked as the best tennis podcast. But Dave Anderson, Daniel Kieran doesn't remember you or me. Are you offended by that? They were there for
No,
they were there they were there for a month, and what's your recollection of that? This was at Seguso Bassett, which is now Chris Everett's. Dave and I were there for longer than an elevator ride, maybe 18 months or something, but it was wasn't quite 2 years. But go ahead.
Yeah, I remember the group coming in well, and I can't remember all the names of the kids. I do remember Daniel Kieran very vividly. I know that
Helen Richardson, I think.
Helen was one of them. I can't recall if it was Richardson. And then shortly after, kind of a fifth wanderer came in, Jasmine Chowdhury. I don't know if she was affiliated with them, but she wasn't.
No, she actually traveled to work with me. They had gone to Macy's, and then they left and just showed up at our place. And but no, she was British as well. But then she came back to work with me several times. But no, she wasn't part of the Angela Buckston group.
Yeah, I remember her arriving right on the heels of it. But the world's small in tennis, and I had a couple of Brits working here a few years ago. I think I told you about them, and sure enough, they had both been they'd been trained by Daniel Kieran. And when I hired them, I filmed them and went to work on their own games, and they were both former D1 players, one at Florida State and the other one at New Mexico. But there were no similarities to what we were talking about in their games and what they had heard. So whatever, I think Daniel Kieran and those other kids, I don't know the others, but I don't think there was any real stick in terms of how they went about their careers if they stayed in tennis, at least from his end. But I've heard the same thing, over and over with his podcast. People love it, and I have yet to listen to one. I think I listened to one, but it was an interesting period. And I remember Angela Buckston, and you could tell the story, Steve, but she was very upset about somebody they had high hopes on, one of the young girls, and was very upset that she didn't think the girl had the grit to play on the tour because of the complaining she was doing about the lodging. That's what sticks in my mind probably most with that experience.
Coming back to South African discipline with and Ann Shilcock as well, just straight shooter, and just being so open and honest. Like, I was doing that wrong. Now I'm going to do it right. Just, someone shows you a better way. Okay. They give you the Braden, they give you the science and the logic. But Angela Buckston, we were working for Robbie Seguso, who was number one in the world for 5 years. And she wanted a meeting. So Robbie agreed to the meeting. And she said, Robbie, you're a Wimbledon doubles champion. I'm a Wimbledon doubles champion. I can tell you, Robbie, people in tennis know you now. But 10, 15 years from now, they won't know who you are. And I just remember being with Robbie at Bollettieri's, and Tommy Haas, we're watching Tommy Haas practice, and Robbie goes, that guy doesn't even know my name. And so but she was just telling Robbie that he really needed to study what we were doing. And she, but like a Daniel Kieran, he also, being so young, it's understandable where he wouldn't have the recollection. They were all same age, 12, 13 years old. But we did the video, and she was there the whole time. But she was more the chaperone, and it wasn't like when they went back, because there was one. I remember there was one, and this happens often, is that one of the girls, it was very emotional because her mother was her coach. You can get in trouble when you start filming and saying, okay, on your serve, your toss is coming down with icicles. And, you know, the swing pattern, you could work at Pizza Hut, but, I mean, you could be nice, but if it's broken, it's broken. But anyway, just with a history, do you find in South Africa that the players, they know about the players from the past?
No, I would say no. It's sad to say it, but I just think the mentality's moved away. I hate using the wording of modern, and everything's so modernized and high performance, and anything related to history would almost be a no-go in so many ways. So yeah, it's sad, but I do think that around the country there would be people would be so into it and have their students dig a little bit deeper than how can you know where you're going if you don't know where you come from, who's gone before you. So that's unfortunate, but I would say no.
I can remember being at a tournament with Angela Buckston, and she says, "Steve, I'm disappointed. I thought you were going to make a major impact on American tennis." And I just kind of smiled and said, "Well, I haven't done that." I think really the players are the brokers, the powerful people in tennis, and so many people in tennis, they're really working with people that they didn't teach from the beginning. So coming back to this website, Control the Controllables, I want to, and I've sent a letter to you, and I know you're going to send it to Stanford Boston. He's interviewed on Control the Controllables, and I think it's a very, very good interview. He's very honest. He talks about his beginning in tennis and how he kind of just fell into it. He's a rugby guy. I know that he spent some time with my son when he was a national coach for the USTA. So for our listeners, so Petrus has a young player that he needs to have, he's looking for funding to go to a tournament, a national tournament. And so Petrus talks to a business person who has the wherewithal to help. But there's a coach in the U.S. and South Africa in Stanford Boston who is going to look at the tape. I think another thing with honesty with Stanford, it's a story you hear on a regular basis now that Andy Roddick is a talking head on a podcast, and he's fun to listen to. That Andy, when we have a film of it, I think his mother's name was Blanche, where he had a regress palm up, and she uses the term pitiful. His serve was pitiful. And out of anger, he puts the racket in that salute position where the palm is down, and he just hits the ball and he just, boom. Obviously that palm is down, so now the swing can go up and the body goes up. And so Stanford was always honest to saying, or Andy, that he learned that it wasn't technical teaching. He just fell upon it. It was just, self-discovery. If I put my racket like this, wow. And the rest is history. I think that his appearance in the Wimbledon final 3 times is a greater achievement than winning the US Open. So I want to get into this a little bit. So Stanford looks at this tape of your student and is critical. Reminds me, I'll just say this and then turn it over to you guys for a sec. There's a gentleman, Jeff Salzenstein. And what he says, he's an internet guru, and what he says about the GreatBase, it doesn't look like pro tennis. Well, you're looking at a film of a 9-year-old. You're looking at a film of a young player. But maybe you could come up with this name, David. I was thinking about it today on the way over, and I didn't have time to get on the computer. First of all, Joey Johnson coached Jeff Salzenstein on the tour. Chad Clark played doubles with him at Wimbledon. They just don't know. But also 2 years ago, Larry Gottfried and Van Winitsky we're going to go on this trip that Braden was on to China. Arthur Ashe, Charlie Passerelle, it was a big thing. But Van Winitsky didn't get to go. And there's a player from Colorado who went. And he was on our campus. We tested him when he went through the USPTA. It was really...
Jeff Benson.
All right, Anderson, I owe you Mountain Dew. So exactly, that's who it was. So I have really no direct connection to Benson, except for I just know, Colorado Hall of Fame and did this and that, and was held in high esteem. But Matt Gobble, who when he was going through grad school, he worked with me. And I guess with my name, Steve Smith, is that way back when Salzenstein was a player, he said, hey, there's this guy in Florida. So Salzenstein, there was time where he actually recommended some people to come see me, but it was just through, because he also is from Colorado. But, we have some lines where don't judge the unfinished product. Especially if you're working with a kid, you got to take them backwards. And the way the brain works is they're going to look mechanical. We're working on mechanics. The Robbie Weiss, who was at Clemson, this is a great story. I've told it before. It's, Jose Garcia is in the lineup at Tennessee now as a freshman, and family came to see us one time. After that, they never worked with a pro or never went to a program. And Paul Anicone's brother, Steve, he met with me because they were going to his program. And he said, I really respect what they're doing, because he allowed them to go back to Knoxville, Tennessee, and have court time. And, he was very classy about it. But the dad said, hey, we just want to stay on this path, and we're going to do this curriculum. So with that, Steve Anicone, I just met with him briefly at that pro tournament in Knoxville. He goes, I don't disagree with one thing they're doing. I just want to know how you get them to do this. And that's where it's the skills test, the quadrant test, the filming, the note taking, and but I want to take the high road. I think with and I think it's great. You're going to meet Petrus with Stanford in May, right?
Yeah, opportunity that they're going to come down this way, and it will be great meeting him.
Because that's just, there has to be that connection. Certainly, it comes down to all these South African names. Like, say, Kevin Kieran. I've had absolutely nothing to do with Kevin Kieran. I could tell you that in 1985, he beat Edberg, and then McEnroe, and then Connors before he lost to Becker. But I could tell you that, well, if we needed to get a reference, we could have Steve Denton talk to Kevin Kieran. Is that people really just need to know, and it's not the good old boy network. Like, oh yeah, we're friends. Is that no? This is the substance. It's not the sizzle. But let me go to you, Dave, and then back to you, Petrus. What do you think of that? Happens all the time, correct? Where the approach that we're using, which is a combination of all these different coaches, the system of systems, it's criticized. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I think anything that, when you were talking about Braden and, telling people to close the racket face, and it seemed like voodoo, but if you go back a little and telling people to turn and coil the upper body and keep the racket up high used to seem like voodoo. I mean, and I just think that we are at least in my lifetime of coaching, we're in a really strange time. I mean, I think it always has been out there where people take shots at what is our system. Even before, it was called the GreatBase, or as Petrus said, it was Tennis Smith when he stumbled on it. But I think that now, it's not just about critics, other coaches may from the outside in, but it's culturally we're fighting so hard because people just really, really, really want it now. Parents do, kids do, and anything resembling a slow cooked meal is just not going down that easy. And so we're kind of fighting on every end. And but I do think there's been tremendous headway. I was doing this yesterday on the court with a couple of parents and a couple of kids, and I was just teaching them a little bit about the links. You know, I was standing by a backboard explaining the name and then and what it meant, and teaching them the linkage, the lineage of stuff that is within programs that are within the city of Dallas. And I started mentioning names, and you know, it's one thing to, and then this is off topic, but it got me thinking a lot yesterday, because it's one thing to, you know, have a lot of criticism from the outside in. I think it's another thing when I think that the programs that have affiliation and have history with it, and coaches that have background in it, I think they need to do a better job. We all need to do a better job of, you know, circling the wagons and, you know, not distancing from the history of what we all have learned. Because as I started going around the city at what are kind of the other prominent programs in Dallas, you know, every one of them had affiliation with what we're doing at Brookhaven each and every day, and the things we've learned, Steve, through the GreatBase and years of doing it. And, I think very important that we find a way to tie it all together from the people that have received it, and I think those people need to do the right thing too, and you know, come together.
The GreatBase really started to come together in 1981, but it was just one of our longtime associates, Richard Hernandez, just saying, Steve, tennis needs a GreatBase initiative. This thing about taking a shot, Rocky won. You want me to take a shot? The bartender. You want me to take a shot? I'll take a shot. Because the bartender was bad-mouthing Apollo Creed. And Rocky goes, how could you bad-mouth the champ? He's the greatest. And anyway, go ahead, Petrus, your turn.
Coach, don't judge the unfinished product. You know, there's so many things to be said. You know, when it comes down to how this boy in this videotape I shared would have looked if he didn't have the GreatBase. What kind of shots would he have had? What would have been his base? Would he have even had the opportunity to play at a higher level? You know, it's so many times it's too easy to, you know, be the third base coach. You know, not a lot of the coaches are bound, you know, really, you know, grinding it out. Know if this kid would be able to rally 5 balls at the end of the day. And yeah, it's unfortunate that people look at it, you know, and go like, whoa, I just don't like what I'm seeing. They've got to give it a chance to evolve. You know, it's the other day I just watched a tape that popped up on my reels on social media, and it was Rick Macy telling a group of students about the ATP forehand, and I thought, well, I want to listen to this. And he says, you've got to close the racket face. This is the ATP forehand. And, you know, I had such a laugh. Everyone at home was thinking I was watching a comedy or something, but it's like, no, we just call that tap the dog on its head. You know, that's the basic, you know, term we use. You know, tap this little chihuahua on its head, close the racket face. And, you know, it's dummied down to where a 6-year-old can understand it. It's dummied down to where, you know, kids can grow with it. I can tell you right now, it's just with the GreatBase, before the GreatBase, you know, the forehand changed every time I went to a course. And, you know, when you read books like The Talent Code from Daniel Coyle and you understand how the brain works, you know, ultimately you want to find a forehand that you can hit 1 million reps with. You know, and then you get people that's like, okay, we're going to change the forehand every day. You know, I think there's definitely space for improvement, and it's not like if I want to say I know it all, absolutely not. But I've really seen that, to give a kid a solid foundation and then evolve from there, is a beautiful picture because, I've seen too many times that a 16-year-old wake up one morning and going like, okay, I'm just not breaking through. I'm just not getting the desired results. And you look at their technique, you look at their basic understanding of fundamentals, and you go like, oh, now you've got to be the bad guy saying, hey, you've got to take a couple of steps back. So for me personally, just a personal level, I don't say everyone's got to be like that. But for me, I want to make sure the kid's got a solid foundation to wherever what happens then, they can excel from.
No, thanks for saying that. With Uncle Vic Braden. So this program, Tyler Junior College, the expression is we put it on the map. So people in tennis knew about the tennis tech program. And I remember Vic saying to me, Steve, it's just going to be one of two things and nothing in between. People are either going to respect it or they're going to resent it. And that just rings so true. Coming back to Stanford, so I was on the road. It was very brief, but my son was with the USTA, and Stanford's a national coach. And we're just having lunch and dinner, meal after meal. That's how it works at a tournament. And he told me his go-to guy was Mark Spann. So after I spoke to you, I called up Mark. And Mark really downplayed it. He said no, that he wasn't that much of an influence. So obviously he was very kind to Stanford to speak so highly of Mark. Mark was coaching Jason Weirsmith. And at that time, Marty Fish and Andy Roddick, so Mark and his player were fortunate enough to spend time in Boca and be part of that. But another person, there's so many, David mentioned the late Billy Freer, South Africans for South African tennis. Hopefully some people listen to this and this could help with fundraising for you. Raven Klaassen. We're up here at Wintergreen, and Raven's coaching Lloyd Harris, and I'm flattered that he's talking to me about the match, and he's going to play Alcaraz on Arthur Ashe. I just use an Agassi term, Air Force, engage weapon number one, just hit 2 first serves. And of course, Lloyd doesn't volley as well as Klaassen, but Klaassen came to us when he was number one, or co-ranked number 1 and 2 with another guy, PJ Domdo. And so I have to stop and think. This was obviously, David, you were in Texas at that time, and this was taking place in Florida. But I know that you've spent time with Raven. But I think you just have to watch how Raven hits the ball. Who's the player from LSU that he played doubles with? Here you go. He's from New Zealand.
Venus.
Michael Venus.
Michael Venus.
Yeah. So one time, Michael Venus, they had gone separate ways, and they were interviewing Michael Venus, and they said, you must have learned a lot from each other. And Michael Venus just said, I can assure you that I learned a lot more from Raven Klaassen that he learned from me. Obviously married with kids, but before he traveled with his family, he would just sit in the stands and just watch. I mean, he's a student of the game. But the thing is, if you could just watch him hit the tennis ball, he's not going to serve people off the court. But, that's where this, go back to the story about Robbie Weiss. So the kid who's playing at Tennessee, Robbie Weiss came to spend 1 day with us. And the reason he spent 1 day with us is he wanted to recruit Spencer Johnson. So there's always the story of circumstance. Why was he there? So he hung out with us the whole day. And for Joey Johnson is saying, I want my kid to go someplace where they'll, be in touch with his background. And so years later, he's coaching, or he's recruiting. Robbie Weiss is recruiting Jose Garcia. And he says to the father, he goes, who's his coach? And it's flattering that he said I was a coach because, I'm a supplemental coach. And they come to see me many, many times. I've known him since he was 8. And you could just see he hits a really good ball. And so anyway, Robbie White said, no way. He goes, I spent time with my name in third person. I spent time with Steve Smith. There's no way that Steve Smith taught him. And then the father said, well, how long did you spend with Steve Smith? And he said, a day. He goes, well, this is what it looks like 10 years later. But people just don't give it a chance. They just don't give it a chance. I think, this point of reference, Petrus, why don't you talk about, you were with us and we sent you over. I said, Petrus, instead of hanging out with us today, we were in Orlando. I said, why don't you go hang out with Matt Coir? And you did that for a couple of days. Why don't you talk about that for a second?
Oh yeah, that was awesome. So he was with Mackenzie McDonald, and I consider myself very fortunate to go watch him practice. And I just sat there with my mouth open. It's one, Matt hits the ball so well, but secondly, as a coach, he hits the ball so well, and then secondly is just hearing their conversations and the way they talk. It's red, yellow, green. It's DNO. It's high, low, high, inside, out. You have this, ATP's top 50 player in the world, talking the same fundamentals that we're talking with juniors. And, it was refreshing. It's almost like that Mamba mentality, where you never get bored with the basics. And it was just special to watch, and come back to the juniors and say, it's a fact. The better the player, the simpler the system. And, it's, again, the same message. That was just amazing to watch. And yeah. So, yeah, I really appreciated that as well.
No, we have quite a bit of film with Mackenzie. Obviously a great player. He really taught well. I should be able to tell you the last name, Rosie, who taught him from the get-go, from kindergarten. But it's the same thing. So you go and you're watching a world-class tennis player, and it's on that world-class stage at the National Tennis Center, and it comes down to that system or the formula: basics, repeat. I do think in other sports, last night I was watching the final, the Frozen Four, and if people just go watch what they're doing in the warm-ups, what they do in the warm-ups is the same thing that they do when they're 10 years ago. They're all, say, 18, 19, 20. Actually, they're older because the rules in hockey are different than the rules in tennis. You can have like a 22-year-old freshman in hockey. But yeah, there's just a disconnect between, because I do think that, again, someone like Stan, and you can go back and listen to that podcast, Control the Controllables. That's, I would recommend anyone to listen to it. It's got a lot of positives, but most of the guests, what Kieran does on his podcast is that pass a baton. He interviews a famous person and says, we're going to ask you to recommend another person. And, so that's one of the reasons that podcast is so popular. It has so many top world-class players. We've had, I think of having a 14-year-old Henry Park as a guest, and how at his indoor club in the state of Washington, Seattle area, it was the curiosity. The head coach says, "What are you doing?" Then the owner called me up and said, "Okay." Just because some players had some results, that the owner was like, "Okay, now I see this." It's kind of like the FedEx logo. If you don't see the arrow in the middle, you don't see it. We use that at the coach's workshops, but once you see it, you will always see it. But no, Matt Coir, if we were to make a list, so you had this conversation with Stanford, and this young kid's named Victor Lilov comes up, and certainly he was in our corner. It's all documented and how we taught him and what have you. And we could make a list of the people that worked with Victor Lilov. And before Stanford worked with him, there was a lot of people that were in between. Stanford did inherit him right after we worked with him. But I certainly know your name would be on that, Petrus, because you took him to tournaments. You traveled in different parts of the United States, got on airplanes with him. He was at Dave Anderson's place. He stayed at Dave Severson's house. He spent so much time. So he's out there for 5 days, and Sievertson's chauffeuring him back and forth, and he's, what an amazing experience. But again, he was so young. Ashland Kruger, they're both 11 years old, and like, okay, where's this going to go? Practicing with one another. But Matt Coir, who's a national coach with the USTA. So those are the connections. So Petrus, that's where, like, when you meet with him in May, it's like, yeah, I spent time with Matt Coir, because Stanford Boston will have respect for Matt Coir. He talks about Tom Gullickson. I had a lot to do with Tim Gullickson through Braden, and the two gullies. I mean, everybody loves the two gullies, but that's not their background. Is taking 8 and 9-year-olds and teaching them how to play tennis. I do think in other cultures, I think that's one thing about Spanish tennis is that there's not as much marketing, and I mean, granted, they have really large commercial clubs now, or commercial academies, but that if you're teaching at the local park or the YMCA, it doesn't matter. I always say, well, does the pro make the place or the place make the pro? Like, say, Brookhaven. Brookhaven is just a wow factor. It's like a little tennis city, and I think they could have like any pro there, and it's like you're going to be successful at a place like that. So that would be where the place makes pro. You need the combination that Dave has, where the pro makes the place. Turn it back to you, Dave.
Well, I mean, one of the things I'd written down to ask you, Petrus, is about I got to spend a few years getting to know the family a little bit, because his son Greg worked for me. Has Cliff Drysdale had any impact in South Africa? Obviously, what a player. Top 10 in the world for many, many years, and has had such such a career as a commentator, and now with his business of managing tennis clubs and owning a few. I'm just wondering about how that has transferred back to his homeland, or has it not at all?
No. It's, again, unfortunate. I think there would be people that, know about him, and, he would have influence, but I don't think he's that well known. And, players will even know that he's a South African.
Yeah.
One thing with Drysdale, I use the same lawyer to help people with getting work permits, and how he initially started. The lawyer has since passed away. Julie Ferguson, 99% sure that's the correct name, and she was very, very good at what she did. So he brought people in through the YMCA. That's how they found to get people work permits, and he hired people from New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa, and they could all party. They all had these outgoing personalities, and the business has really evolved. But it's interesting. Dave Secker has been a guest on the podcast many times. The CEO of Truin bought Peterborough Wash International, and they bought Drysdale. And so I'm just the guy making the video. So the CEO of the company comes in, and Dave Secker goes, well, maybe something really positive will come of this, because I think they're bigger than Club Corp now as far as controlling courts. Do you know if that's true, Dave? Yeah,
I think Troon, manages more, I think. Yeah. So
anyway, he brought his son back. So the daughter was given, it's just, again, story of circumstance. The athletic director at North Carolina State said, you need to have a walk-on. So this gentleman, the CEO, his daughter was the walk-on. So I'm making this video, and the guy's disagreeing with everything I say as I make the video. No, the racket face is open, and it's continental grip, and this, that, and the other thing. And I said, well, I'm just making the tape for the coach. I said, your daughter's just here to have the tape made. I said, I'm going to send the tape to the coach, and when she shows up, the coach is going to have her do what's on the tape. And, Vicky used to always say that when you would talk, if someone's, they're in charge of 500 people, and now, the tennis coach is saying, you're going the wrong way. He used to always say the CEOs will have a tough time with that. But but no, I think Drysdale, I mean, that business has grown. I mean, but I would say it's more service-based than education-based. But Petrus, just like you taught in JL's hometown, you also, Nelsbray, correct? That's where Drysdale's from.
Nelsbray.
Yeah. But those type of connections, so Drysdale, I know, Dave, you spent more time with him than I have. I was introduced to him just when he was on the circuit doing TV. In fact, he did TV with Braden. No, that's interesting. Coming back to Stanford, Craig Halder, the Canadian, he followed me as a tennis director at Seguso Bassett. So Stanford came into the Seguso Bassett right after we left, Dave. And that's where he had the conversation with Daniel Kieran, and Daniel Kieran said, no, I missed you. So he wasn't coached. So they're just reminiscing and trying to catch up. And but no, I think that if you get a chance to meet with him, tell us about the film that you showed to him. Is that the boy had to change, right? I mean, he's 11, right?
Yeah, it's a young 11-year-old, just turned 11. We filmed that we wanted to use as critique. I was actually a little bit naive, just thinking, hey, here's a possible person that's been helping out, us develop this kid. It's not like he's the finished product. I sent the tape, and it ended up being Stanford. And unfortunately, to his credit, he just didn't like it. I appreciate his view. But, this kid's doing great. Ray Sean, as all the other players, the journey continues, and there's good things lie ahead.
Well, I think with their listeners, the filming. So Stanford just saw the post. If they saw the pre and the post, that's certainly different. But again, it comes back to the tennis math. They need to know the rationale. But it's so important, listeners. It's so important to document development, and people are going to look worse before they look better. And the Braden line comes up all the time. Let people loosen up after they win nationals. But I would say today, a lot of times people have not seen tennis be taught. It's at most beginning levels, it's an activity. It's not instruction. But there's a definition of teaching. Teaching is information transfer. Then there's coaching. But also he has great credibility because he's obviously with Andy Roddick. We have some comments on, say, Andy Roddick, like anybody would, but I think our comments are for a different slant because he's a great player, obviously Hall of Famer. But I wrote this down because again, he learned the serve through trial and error. He didn't learn it through specific instruction. Andy Roddick, I'm from Nebraska. I don't do grips. Hey, I mean, that's so common where, they ask Pete Sampras. There's the film of Ken Rosewell. They ask him what grip they use, and they go, this one. I always talk about, well, you're going to, you want to play the saxophone. Initially, you need an instructor. It's great to have inspiration. Go to the, go to the Chaz concert to be inspired. Andy Roddick, Roger Federer is an artist, a technician. I just hit the crap out of the ball. I like to quote, what do the athletes say? Andy Roddick, he's on the stage being inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame. I feel good because on the stage behind me is Jim Courier. He also has a crappy backhand. Roddick one time was on stage with all these players, and he definitely is a comedian. I mean, he's it's interesting. He just a high school graduate, but someone like that, you just think about the people he's been around. The pro athletes are very successful if they're wise. I mean, it's like they have 3 MBAs. So Roddick, I think my favorite quote of Roddick is, "I don't get NASCAR, 4 hours of turning left." And but that's not the world that Stanford Boston, in my opinion. You'll get a chance to meet with him, and hopefully you guys can connect. And again, South Africans for South Africans, with that exchange rate, it's like next to impossible. So we had this young girl over here. We sponsored her. I couldn't pronounce her name correctly. Tell me.
Shanae.
Shanae.
Yeah, it's kind of like Peter. I said it a different way. I said it a different way each time. What a classy kid, or helping you with a little chunk of change. But what you're doing, I think we need to get more of a visual on that. Is helping kids, that need help. But also too is that we did that once before for you, where at a much higher level generated a lot more money, and people just really need to stay the course. I talked to a dad just the other day, and he just gets it. And because if someone's going to really do what we're teaching, they have to spend so much time with it. Because we're not teaching people to win at an early age. You tell people to go to the net, they're going to lose at a faster rate. If you really want to win early on, have a palm-up serve and just get it in. Because the serve doesn't count the 12s and 14s. It's really not a factor unless some kid is shaving in the 14 and unders. Have a Western grip, collapse the wrist on the backhand. Don't go to the net. Don't take a ball out of the air. Just keep looping balls up high, aim to the middle of the court, and cheat like crazy. I mean, that pretty much defines a lot of 12 and under tennis. And, I think about a Welby, for example. 95% of people play at tennis. Dave, your turn. We have to wind this down in a few minutes. I know you got to run.
Yeah,
Petrus, you and I can stay on the line with Ivan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wrote down system, and the thing about I think Petrus, you mentioned it early on. I mean, we're trying to teach a wide range of human beings how to enjoy the sport of tennis and make it a sport for a lifetime. I mean, at the end of the day. And then there's another side of that where, we are trying to get a different section of that population to be the best they can be, to maybe get on a college lineup. And it just kind of depends on individual goals. But so, there's those that we're teaching to enjoy tennis and those that are goal-oriented juniors. And I think that so much of the light is shined on the people who, are the goal-oriented juniors and people like that. And I think that, one of the things, I follow Jeff Lewis, and I really like and respect the fact that he gets really wrapped up in just trying to get everybody to hit the ball better, even if they're not necessarily goal-oriented juniors. And, there's reminders of this stuff all the time in my life that pop up. And yesterday morning, 6 a.m., I looked down or Friday morning rather, and 2 former kids are out there in their 40s now, and they're hitting balls, and they did go on and play college tennis now. But to me, those are just huge victories. Seeing former students later in their life come back, join the club, they're still hitting tennis balls, and they both hit the ball great. And I had our kids stop and watch them. One played at Creighton, one played at Case Western, but they're enjoying tennis, and they still hit the ball great. And the fact that they learned to hit the ball great has allowed them to play without too many injuries, and they can play once a week and still be pretty successful at it because they're clean. And I think that the Andy Roddick's have made coaches around them look great because of who they are athletically and who they are internally and their will and their desire and so many things. I think Shane Van Zandt said this to me once. He said, I think coaches are overrated and underrated. And I think that that is just such an incredibly true statement. And, I think that, the putting the racket in people's hand, getting them to hit the ball the best possible way. It's underrated in my opinion. And I think in addition to being underrated, it's very misunderstood. Very misunderstood.
No, that's well put. One thing with the Roddicks, started in Nebraska, but they were in Texas. And then Dave, you and I were in Florida. So we coached against John Roddick in Texas. I did some work as a consultant for their academy while they owned it, and then they actually sold it. So both ways. When they sold it, it still had the Roddick name on it. So I was at the U.S. Open, and John Roddick wasn't there when I was training the coaches, and I went up, I thanked them, and I said, I know a couple of people, you played in the juniors. I saw you play in the juniors against people like Clayton Stanley and Chad Clark, and John Roddick looked at me and said, victory or death. And, John Roddick had so much to do with Andy Roddick being so good. When you have a brother like that, I mean, he went on, and, so when I remember being at Seguza with you, and Andy showed up, we never coached him for a second, but there was a kid named Jason Hazley we coached. And another kid named Brooke, you probably would remember Brooks. So these, there's like four kids, and we just organized matches. And talk about being competitive. Macy always talks about why Andy Roddick made it is, they're playing touch football or flag football. And Andy from Nebraska, he's the smallest kid. He just goes down and tackles the kid. Macy's always telling that story. But, at one point with the Roddick Tennis Academy, if people were beginners, they weren't really and this is where around the world people need a pre-academy. Myron Grunberg had this set up where the kids had to come and work with me for 3 weeks before they could enter the academy. I think if, and again, with Stanford Boston, we'll say, hey, listen to this podcast. We're telling people to listen to the one where he spoke, and you get a lot out of it. But here's to me a great story. So I have 3 older brothers, and my brother Pat, I'm the youngest, and he goes, hey, and I think it's cool to mow the lawn. It's kind of dangerous to push a lawnmower, So my brother Matt, I was so dumb. It's like, yeah, I'll mow the lawn. And so at one point, my mother, she pulls up in the driveway, and I'm trying to get the lawnmower going, and blue smoke is everywhere, and she's with a businessman. She's selling real estate, and they're looking at properties. And so this man said to me about the lawnmower, he goes, did you put oil in it? And I looked right at him and said, no, it takes gas. And so right there, it was like they knew that they were talking to it. The man knew he was talking to an idiot. Is that obviously the lawnmower needed gas. And I use that story when I talk about tennis teaching many times because you know or you don't know. And I didn't know that the lawnmower needed oil. And but I would say that young players need to have a great base. Young players need to be fundamentally sound. Tell us your day-to-day working with these players, Petrus.
So currently, we've got a morning program. Some of them leave earlier to go to school, and then we go back from 2 to 5. And most of these kids come by foot, and these kids need to get home. So yeah, that's a typical day for us.
And do the kids? I've always thought it was a great thing in so many ways that the young South Africans coming up, still to this day, they play a different sport every season. The girls are playing field hockey or the boys are playing rugby. They do athletics, track and field. How about your students? Are they still playing other sports?
Some of them, yes. But in general, Coach, South Africa's on some athletes, with the multiple sports. the kids are just doing too many things as well. I would say that we've got a fine balance, a soccer, a lightning ball. We try and make sure that those who only play tennis do develop, a little bit more than the kids that actually would just play multiple sports. Some exposure to other sports as well.
It's interesting in South Africa where you say you're at a what do you call it, a barbecue? What do you call it, a braai?
Yeah.
And then the kids are actually playing cricket. They got a tennis ball and a tennis racket, but they're playing cricket with the tennis ball and the racket. Here's one thing about Andy Roddick. At one point, the Roddick Foundation supported the late Bobby Curtis. There's some minivans, and they're getting underprivileged kids to play tennis. And I think Mr. Roddick's first name was Jerry. And I know Myron Grunberg, used to just say he has so much respect for Mr. Roddick. Just straightforward, honest, hardworking, boom, practical. So Andy was very young at this time. Bobby Curtis, I was good friends with the late Bobby Curtis. And I think it was something like Gilbert wanted $1 million a year. And I'm going to guess that maybe he worked for the LTA before, but he was overpaid by the LTA. Others too, Anaco, was like, how much are you paying these people? So, but Gilbert was saying, I want this much money, but we got to hire somebody to help Andy with his volleys. If you've been around Andy Roddick, and he's a great player, but it wasn't like, well, they're and granted, he's specializing in singles. You hear that, well, people are specializing in doubles. But they weren't turning to him to be a doubles player. But he'd be the first one to yell as loud as a kid could, my volleys suck. I get a kick out of listening to Sam Querrey now. So I picked on his volley for a long time. I said, could you imagine if the Sam Querreys of the future could volley? I remember telling Paul Rodert that when he was in charge of the USTA. I said, the Sam Querreys of the future need to be able to volley. And on our podcast with Manny Diaz, asking him about John Isner's backhand volley. Being at Saddlebrook, where I'm with Austin Krychek, and they do this drill. If you win off the volley, you get 2 points. And Isner yells out, hey, Krychek, you should win this. And it's like, well, why don't you guys work on your volley? But I do think that there's a lot of romancing. Once you get to the top, the very top, in all fairness to everybody involved, it's not being critical, is there really isn't an off season. The players really don't. I mean, one off season that the pros had was during COVID. And I've mentioned this before where, what's the name of the Australian with the big serve? Curios. And a woman asked him on a podcast, well, are you working on your volley so you can serve and volley when you come back from when the tour reopens? Dave, I know you got to get going here. Why don't you ask Petrus another question or two, and you got to run off.
Well, Petrus, it's been a pleasure reconnecting with you. It's been years, it's not really a question. It's just a comment. I hope that you can be a catalyst in your own program, spawning outward to spread good information throughout the country. But it's intriguing to me that there is a rich history in South African tennis, and as Steve mentioned, there's so much of that history that's tied to this, and I hope you can keep fighting a good fight to try to tie it all together and get some of those people to take a little bit more of an interest in their roots and get it going. And I wish you the best of luck with it, because I think that would be a great noble cause, and I know you're thinking along those lines anyways. Anything we can do here back in the States to help out, let us know.
One thing, Dave, to add to that was like Jeff Cotier given the title of director of player development, but he's teaching, or he's working 25, 30 weeks a year on the road, and he's got a family. So he had to resign because there's just not the finances. So he has to make a living. Or like Raven Clausen, we talked to him quite a bit about retirement. So he took some time off, and then he's been doing some projects with the Indian, maybe not the Federation, but it's called the Dream Doubles, and he's traveling with, I think, 7 or 8. Maybe that was just a short-term project, but he was doing that, traveling with some Indian players. But just like Stanford obviously is in the U.S., but I think there has to be a connection with, like say with Craig Tiley. Obviously, he's in a position. There's so many people in a position of influence, but there needs to be a curriculum. There needs to be a pathway. You just can't throw money at something. But that's where I think it's great that you spoke. You mispronounced Schalk's first name, but for our listeners, I mean, this young guy, he's a rugby player. He started playing tennis late, and he can flat out coach. I mean, it's just an amazing thing. But a lot of times, Billie Jean King said that, where, say for example, we're the subordinates. The people that are working on the tour, the people that are working at the national tennis centers, the people that are working with the federations, we know what they're doing, but they don't know what we're doing. That comes from Billie Jean King. So that grassroots level, there's really just not enough of a connection. Like Dave, it's amazing how many college tennis players you've developed, but how much recognition does your program get for that? It's the people that get recognition are the ones that are on TV sitting in the booth. And I've always said there's some people that change their last name to be sitting in the booth. Dave, you got 1 more minute. We can continue after you run off, but what do you got? I think what you just said was great, but anything else?
No, that's good. I've really enjoyed it today, and I hope we can keep collectively fighting the good fight and keep making progress, because I believe we are making progress.
Yeah, no, I think with the podcast actually have helped. But a lot of times, Andy Spitzel was, you were around Petrus, and he did a lot on Instagram. Those videos are still available to look at. He certainly got tired of me asking the same question over and over again on the forehand, the wrist on the forehand, the windshield wiper, the doorknob, and all that stuff. But it's just more and more people need to realize. So at one time, there was just a time period where the Steve and Andy stuff, or now I'll hear, it's just Steve Smith stuff. That means that they haven't really studied. They have no idea that the history, the background, where the information comes from. But Petrus, we can talk to you a little bit longer. But Dave, I know you got to run. But thanks so much again for helping us with these podcasts.
Dave, I just want to say thank you very much for your time and your kind words. The feeling's really mutual. And, I remember last time I spoke to you and Steve, I cried almost like a baby, just saying you guys are such a big inspiration for me. Just watching what you guys are doing and following you guys, it's really amazing. And thank you for everything you guys are also doing for the game of tennis. We need more people like you guys. And, all the best at Brookhaven as well. And, just congrats on all the work you guys have been doing.
Well, Petrus, thanks for the kind words. Petrus, we'll stay on. I know, David, you got to run. So we'll catch up with you.
Okay.
Thanks,
Take
Dave.
care. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
David, adios.
One question I want to ask is...
yes, I'm here, Coach.
With Gabby playing guitar, I'll just throw you this line. It's the same formula. To get better at guitar is the same formula as it is for tennis, correct?
Absolutely, Coach. Gabby came from a background of tennis. And, it's actually very funny, when you meet people that haven't seen Gabby or us for a while. And it's like, where's Gabby? And, amazing tennis player or little tennis player. And how's she doing? And I'm going like, well, she's not playing anymore due to an injury. And they're like, oh, wow, what now? Is she okay? What's she doing? And it's like, it couldn't go better. She found she found guitar, or guitar found her. And, it's the same concept, mile in. And, the two most important days in your life, the day you're born, the day you find out why. And what she discovered is that she has a big passion for music and playing guitar. And, she's leading worship at our church, at our fellowship. And, it's actually been just refreshing to watch again, as a coach as well. Someone that, and I actually encourage all our students, you've got to learn a new skill every now and then, because it keeps you, just activated your mind. And she made tremendous gains and strides with the guitar, and it's actually been inspiring to just see her, embrace the guitar and live life now without tennis and that guitar.
Well, I think it's important to bring that up for a lot of reasons. Number one, perhaps not in any order, but number one for me is, I tell kids that all the time, is that if you develop the work ethic, you say you put a lot of time, and don't question, just put your head down and go to work. You put a lot of time into tennis, but then you go on to another endeavor. You do have that work ethic. It does transfer. Did she have instruction? And did she had a number of different instructors? How's that go?
No. She, pre-COVID, just briefly started. She took about 4 lessons to stop. And ever since then, she self-discovered. She studied on YouTube. YouTube's got gold. And I think just the tennis was the biggest coach, even on the guitar, the habit poem. Things come to my mind. She reciting the habit poem so many times, and, understanding that, you need to learn the chords, and then you need to repeat them. And, then, the good basics will turn into good instincts. And, she didn't have a lot of formal instruction.
And I'll put the challenge on Ivan to look on Facebook and put your daughter up reciting the habit poem. Now we just read the habit poem because we're pretty much just have rotating students. But when you have a squad, at one point we made it mandatory where you had to have it memorized. With Alexander, I know has a large car collection. He's still too young for the real car, though, right?
Oh my word, Alexander! What a great guy! He's growing into this really solid young guy. I think I'm pretty boring for him to have a conversation about cars, but no, he loves it. And I still remember clearly when Alexander, you can buy yourself a Ferrari. You just need a tennis game. And I remind him so much often about that. Although tennis is not his first passion and his only passion.
For me, throwing that out, it's like Walter Gretzky saying to his son, he's talking about cars. He goes, become a great hockey player, and you could buy whatever kind of car you want. But no, I think it's been great to have you on. I apologize to the listeners if Ivan's going to do the best he can with the sound. It hasn't been perfect, but it's been great to connect. I think I can just echo what Dave Anderson said at the end. And I've heard you say it many times, but say it a different way, is, just fight the good fight. And, I do think that, people should listen to Stanford Boston on the podcast, Control the Controllables, this podcast, and that bridge between, working with beginners and high performance, that needs to take place. And, with what you're doing, hopefully you can do it for years and years to come, but helping underprivileged kids. And but I do think South Africans for South Africans. There's so many South Africans that are doing really well, that are no longer residing in South Africa. Even like Miran Man, who's helped us so much with the podcast, been a guest many times, and I've known him since he's 10. I think now he's 42. I think he moved to Canada by the time he was 2, but he's South African. And I was just doing a few things online last night. You have 700,000 players. So that's not really that large a group of players, but you have a lot of sunshine. And, in this end, in the U.S., we have to be concerned with pickleball invading tennis courts, and but it's we need more people like not only yourself, but now I think young Schalk. So so you're one generation, he's a generation before you, and that's if our listeners could get a visual on that, because we just need quality instruction. Kids just need to get a good start. How's it go? There's no substitute for good beginning. But all the best.
Substitute. Yeah.
All the best to you and Christelle,
Coach.
your kids, and we'll connect again. I'd love to come down there another time too.
Oh.
It was great to go to South Africa.
I just want to say as well, Ivan, thank you so much for having me and being patient with me with my English. But no, it's you guys are, like I said, a big inspiration to every day. And I mean, you're a mentor to me, and someone I really look up to. And I just want to say thank you for what the game of tennis. It's actually amazing. I really appreciate it.
All right, Petrus, thanks for the kind words, and all again, best to you and everybody in your corner of the world.
Thank you, Petrus.
All right, thanks.
Thank you so much, Coach. Thank you, Ivan. Adios.
All right,
Bye.
listeners, another podcast in the books. Thanks for listening. 245.
245.
Adios, amigos.
Adios.